Good afternoon and welcome to the latest session in the VBA's Practitioner Educational Series. Today you'll hear from Glenn Wilson and Adam Falconer. They're both team leaders from the VBA Inspection Service Plumbing Unit. I'm Darren Nixon, Manager of VBA Inspection Services for the Plumbing Unit. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which our head office is situated, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We appreciate their love of the country and we respect their care and sustainability of this amazing land. We all come home. Before we begin this session, it's been recorded and a link to the presentation will be made available on our website along with previous webinars. We have set time aside at the end of this presentation for questions. However, I'd like to draw your attention to the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Encourage you to type your questions throughout the presentation and we'll respond at the end. We'll attempt to address as many of the questions in the time available. Your feedback is also very important. So after the presentation, you'll receive a link to a short survey. We value any feedback you wish to provide and about this presentation or other suggested future webinars and topics that you would like us to cover in the future.
Thank you, Darren, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we'll be presenting an overview of the Proactive Inspection Program, known as PIP. As Darren mentioned, the webinar will be presented in two parts, beginning with myself giving you an oversight or an insight as to what and why the VBA has the PIP program. And following this, I'll hand over to my colleague and fellow team leader, Adam Falconer, to go through a few more common non-compliances we find within plumbing when conducting proactive plumbing inspections. Proactive Inspection Program, what is it and why do we do it? The VBA launched the Proactive Inspections Program in 2015. It involves inspecting building and plumbing works under construction prior to completion of construction and an occupancy permit being issued. Basically a snapshot of what has been constructed and installed at that moment in time. By inspecting buildings under construction, the VBA can identify and have addressed any potential failures or non-conformances early, allowing rectifications to be implemented quickly and cost effectively. The inspections are undertaken by VBA authorised officers who are either registered building inspectors, building surveyors, or registered plumbers, with inspections being conducted throughout Victoria on a daily basis. Authorised officers will engage with all plumbing and building practitioners so as to achieve compliance with all plumbing building codes, acts and regulations. The team undertakes a large volume of inspections, both domestic and commercial sites, and typically inspect over 1,000 sites each month. Since the launch, the VBA has carried out over 37,000 inspections. Over 12,000 notifications with at least one item of risk being identified have been sent since the introduction of the program. The VBA's goal is to inspect 10% of all building permits issued in Victoria each year. This is in line with the Victorian Government Minister's Statement of Expectations. How do we select sites? Following this flowchart through we select sites using different methods, starting with issued building permits, which fit into the PIP framework to identify building practitioners and relevant building surveyors who fit the risk-based framework for the volume and nature of class of building being constructed. And as an example, we will select sites from permits for classes of buildings that are intended for human occupation and are greater than 2 stories and have a high cost of work. We also use intelligence-based identification of sites, which is derived from a variety of sources, both internally to the VBA and from external stakeholders. Thirdly, our authorised officers are empowered where they see a need to conduct ad hoc inspections of sites that come to their attention while attending other pre-allocated sites. The overall intention is to inspect all classes of building permits that is proportional to the volume of those classes of permits. We do not specifically target building or plumbing practitioners and attempt to achieve as much randomness to our selections as possible. The timing of our inspection is critical to ensure that any work completed that will ultimately be covered up by cladding is inspected for compliance to relevant standards, thus avoiding any potential risks for the occupiers of that building into the future. How do we conduct our inspections? Our authorised officers will enter the sites that are under construction to complete an inspection when the site is deemed to be safe to enter, following an OH&S risk-based assessment of the site on arrival. The site, if deemed to be safe, will then be entered if the site is occupied by trades on site performing construction activities, whereupon the officer will identify themselves and provide proof of their identity. Or where a site is open and accessible when unoccupied by trades, where they will provide in a conspicuous location a notice of entry and search under section 228(b)(7) of the Building Act, which will provide the day and time of the inspection, was conducted and by whom, and the nature of the inspection, i.e. building or plumbing. Authorised officers will then inspect the site following an extensive checklist of items to be inspected for either plumbing or building work. Officers are also trained to identify OH&S items, i.e. site signage, site cleanliness, and site security for compliance also. If there are items of risk identified that are of an OH&S nature, depending on the level of risk, another government agency may be notified. The risk matrix. Upon completion of the inspection, the authorised officer will, through their experience and knowledge, apply a risk rating scale to determine the level of scrutiny it places over each item of risk identified through the inspection. The scale considers non-compliance to a particular standard, potential adverse effects on the future safety of the building occupants, people nearby, and on the amenity of the building itself. Those risk ratings are as follows. Low risk pass. The inspection has not identified any non-compliances at the time of inspection, and the work is deemed to be in progress. Low risk. Non-compliance of a low risk nature has been identified. It is considered that the non-compliance is not a risk to the future amenity of the building and its occupiers. This does not mean that the item can be left unrectified, but in some instances may be that it is still in progress and future work will rectify. Medium risk. Non-compliance to relevant standards has been identified, and there is a possibility that this will have an impact on the future amenity of the building and those who occupy it. Rectification work to comply will need to be performed and evidence provided to show compliance has been achieved. High risk. Non-compliance has been identified, and it is considered that if left unresolved that there will be an adverse health and safety risk to the building and its occupiers. Rectification work to comply will need to be performed and evidence provided to show compliance has been achieved. High-risk items identified usually result in a referral to another government agency, such as WorkSafe, for their attention. The VBA works proactively with other government agencies, such as WorkSafe, the Environmental Protection Authority, and Energy Safe Victoria. When items of risk are identified that may fall under their area of responsibility for the health and safety of all Victorians. Notifications and who receives them. Upon completion of inspections and following the PIP guidelines, authorised officers will, from their reports, provide letters of risk, which will include photos of the non-compliances identified and their risk rating. The highest rated risk item will determine the outcome of the letter of risk. This will then be forwarded to the relevant building practitioner and in some instances to the relevant building surveyor for their response. This is done because the building permit only identifies the building practitioner and the relevant building surveyor. Plumbing practitioners and their responsible work is unknown at this stage. It is expected that the building practitioner will notify the relevant plumbing practitioner responsible for any non-compliant work identified, as well as providing the details of the plumbing practitioner responsible for the work to the VBA, so that we can engage with that plumbing practitioner also. A time to achieve compliance is dependent on the highest level of risk identified, and responses are monitored by our admin team with follow-ups requested if no response is received. Enforcement. Enforcement to achieve compliance to risk items identified is generally expected to be achieved by the building practitioner working collaboratively with their plumbing practitioners. However, if this cannot be achieved, then the matter will reside with the RBS to manage. In extreme circumstances, the VBA may request of the RBS to not issue an occupancy permit due to the serious nature of the risk identified and its need to be rectified prior to occupancy. Of course, this is a last resort request and the pathway to compliance is sought prior to handover. That covers the how, why, and outcome of inspections. And so in closing, I'll just share with you a snapshot of inspections completed for the yearly quarter, October to December 2021. When considering plumbing inspections separate to both building and plumbing inspections combined, this graph gives a geographic breakdown of inspections. So as an average, 1,000 plumbing inspections are conducted throughout the state of Victoria each quarter. Of these inspections, it can be demonstrated that the growth corridors, that is the large volume housing estates in the west, north and southeast of metropolitan Melbourne, have shown to have the largest number of medium and high risk items identified per inspection numbers. Inspections conducted in suburban Melbourne and regionally have identified less medium and high risk items and are consistent with each other. It should be noted, for reasons I cannot explain at this time, the findings in this graph are opposite to what building found with their inspections for the same period, something that we are looking to as to the reasons why. In closing again, for more details on how and why, as well as a full reporting activities of the Proactive Inspections Program, these can be viewed by visiting the VBA's website as per the details on this slide. Hopefully you now have an understanding of what Proactive Program PIP is and does, and the importance of the work that is completed to identify any potential risks for the health, safety and future amenity of occupiers of constructed premises. I'm now going to hand over to my fellow team leader, Adam Falconer, who will present in detail a number of plumbing-related non-compliances that are consistently identified by proactive inspections. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Glenn. Welcome, everybody. I'll now go through our most identified non-compliances found from the inspections conducted. Of these inspections, 30% were found to have non-compliant plumbing work deemed to be of a medium risk, requiring rectification and evidence provided of the rectification. A further 30% were deemed to be of a low risk, requiring rectification, but with evidence being supplied, but without the need for evidence to be supplied back to us. This means that 60% of inspections conducted resulted in letters of risk being sent to practitioners. The most common non-compliances that were found are to do with gas fitting, roof plumbing, and sanitary plumbing. Let's start with gas fitting. Flue clearances. We tend to find a lot of flue clearance issues with ducted heater flues, which are either too close to other surfaces and or too close to the roof coverings. As this photo shows, we have what looks like to be a flue that is too close to a mechanical air inlet and the roof coverings. In this instance, we would ask the plumbing practitioner to raise the height of the flue and provide some sort of documentation that both appliances cannot be used concurrently. Failing that, the flue would need to be moved to a more suitable location. This slide shows a flue with appropriate height above the roof and an appropriate distance from the mechanical air inlet. The 5601's clause 6.9.2 state where any flue terminal is to be located above a roof, the following applies. The roof terminal shall be at least 500 mm from the nearest part of the roof. And note, this distance is measured before the flue cowl. Figure 6.2 in the 5601 shows the measurements for the locations of flue terminals. For this instance, we are looking at item K. And K shows that from a mechanical air inlet, including a spar blower, a distance of 1.5 metres is required for natural draft flues and 1 metre for fan-assisted flues. Unsupported flues. This slide depicts ducted heating flues that have not been supported independently of the gas appliance. We can see the flue subjecting pressure on the appliance and the flue has reverse fall in the horizontal section. The 5601's clause 6.8.2 states, flues shall be supported independently of the appliance unless the appliance is designed to support the flue. Flues shall be securely fixed and adequately supported by brackets fastened to the building structure at suitable points to ensure the stability of the flue unless the flue is designed to be structurally independent of the building. The idea here is to support the flue so the appliance can be removed without disturbing the flue. Gas pipework separation. For all the plumbers out there, we realise that this is something out of your control. This one is for the builders to be aware of and communicate to the electrical trades to be mindful of their regulations and other trade services. Excellent. 5601's clause 5.3.4 state, there shall be at least 25 mm separation between any consumer piping and any above ground metal, electrical conduit, electrical wire or cable not in a conduit, or electrical earthing electrode. Multi-layer pipe. Photo 1 on this slide shows multi-layer gas pipe exposed to UV, and the penetration is not sealed at the gas meter. Photo 2 shows the multi-layer pipe is exposed to UV as well. The other issues on this photo are that there's no gas cock on the hot water service and no form of disconnection. 5601's clause 5.3.17 state, multi-layer piping installed above ground shall be protected against degradation from exposure to ultraviolet light and physical damage where it is likely to occur. As we can see in this photo, the plumber has chosen to protect the piping from both physical and UV damage by installing the steel or aluminium sleeve. Of course, this is not the only available method. Reversion fittings. This one is an all too common fault we find in the inspection space and the audit space for that matter. It is much easier to install reversion fittings in this instance without the plaster. The 5601's clause 5.2.13 state, in installations in Class 1 buildings in Australia, where a proprietary multi-layer piping system having a main run exceeding 10 metres in length and connected to more than one appliance, reversion to standard thread complying to AS ISO 7.1, a BSPT, or a standard annealed copper tube shall be provided at both of the following accessible locations: in the main run immediately prior to the first branch takeoff point, and also in the main run immediately prior to the last branch takeoff point. An example is shown in the top photo of a copper reversion fitting installed, and the diagram at the bottom is figure 5.2 from the 5601s, and it shows the acceptable reversion options for complying with this clause. Roofing. Pressure flashings seem to get a few plumbers out there. Here are two examples of what not to do. The top photo is non-compliant as the pressure flashing has been used against a cladding with grooves, which isn't a smooth surface. The apron flashing in this photo also has a few issues. The next photo shows a flashing constructed correctly, but installed in a non-compliant manner. The raked brickwork is not a smooth surface, and the fixings are spread further than the 100 mil required. The information on this slide has been taken from the updated practice notes, which can be found on our website. Pressure flashings may be used in lieu of cutting grooves into walls, provided they are used only with smooth surface finished walls, e.g. smooth finished concrete or smooth finished brickwork with flush pointed mortar. It's provided that the sealing is applied in a sandwich seal of approximately 20 mil in width. The fixing of the flashing must ensure that a durable seal is maintained. The seal is protected from excessive movement due to expansion. The fixing intervals have no more than 100 mil spacings. The fixing devices are compatible with flashing material and comply with the installation requirements of HB 39. Sumps and side chutes. Box gutters, sumps, rain heads and side chutes seem to be our biggest headache in the industry, and I'm sure you are just as frustrated as we are. Here are a few examples of some very common non-compliant installations. Box gutters holding water. These examples here, they don't discharge via sumps or rain heads, Instead, they discharge through a side chute, and quite small ones at that. Overflow devices are critical to a box gutter installation. Failing to install appropriately sized and positioned overflow devices can lead to serious damage to buildings and contents, often resulting in high-cost insurance claims. A rain head, a sump with side overflow device, or a sump with a high-capacity overflow device are at the moment the only acceptable DTS method of discharge and overflow for box gutters. The top diagram is an example of box gutter design fitted with a sump and side overflow provision. These are referenced from AS 3500 Book 3. The bottom diagram shows an example of a high capacity overflow device installed within the sump. The sump must be sized to the 3500 Book 3 with a minimum length of 400 mil and with a minimum depth of not less than 150 mil when fitted with the high capacity overflow device, and when either one or two box gutters enter the sump. Box gutters. Several box gutter issues on this slide. Changes of direction, incorrect termination, reduced in size and or insufficient overflow provision, and box gutters fixed to the frame. The following design and installation parameters must be achieved to satisfy the requirements of 3500 Book 3. Box gutters must have a minimum sole width 200 mil for domestic class 1 buildings and 300 millimeters for other building classes. A minimum depth of 75 mil at the high end. The sole must be smooth to prevent permanent ponding with a gradient between a range of 1 in 40 and 1 in 200. Discharge at the downstream end without change in direction, i.e. not to the side. Be straight without a change of direction. The box gutter must be sealed to the rain head or sump. The sole width must not be reduced towards the outlet without a proportional increase in depth. Where sarking is installed, it must be a minimum 25 millimeters into the box gutter. No part of the outlet is above the sole of the sump or rain head. And the lap joints of box gutters to have 25 mil laps sealed and fastened in the direction of fall. This information has also been lifted from the updated plumbing practice note on box gutters, available on our website. Downpipe spreaders. This slide is showing spreaders discharging over flashings and constructed inappropriately. HB 39's clause 5.7.7 state, spreaders must be used to drain water, may be used to drain rainwater from a higher roof surface with a catchment area not exceeding 15 metres squared, provided the following conditions are satisfied. When discharging onto a tiled roof, the lower section is sarked a minimum width of 1.8 metres either side of the point of discharge, extending down to the eaves gutter. When discharging onto a corrugated roof, a minimum width of 1.8 metres on either side of the point of discharge is sealed for the full length of the side laps. The increased roof water volume from the upper roof is not to enter any seam of the roof coverings of the lower roof. No spreader is to discharge roof water onto or over ridge tiles, mortar joints, flashings, timber fascia, or a roof sheet side lap. No spreader is to have its discharge entering any part of any building. Spreaders are to discharge all roof water onto roof coverings in the direction of flow, avoiding discharging onto laps on lower roof sheets and tiles. When discharging an upper roof catchment onto a lower roof, the total roof area, including the additional upper roof catchment area, is to be considered for the inclusion. When sizing the lower roof, roofing, gutters and downpipes, spreaders do not discharge onto sheets or tiles discharging into valleys. Soaker flashings. These types of soaker flashings are very common in the industry at the moment. The issues we have are that we are limited to the current DTS methods of design and installation. The SA HB 39s 2015, the scope of the standard is to ensure that the installation of roof coverings and flashings are watertight. So what we are looking for is the top end of the soaker to be folded back over itself as we do with the valley gutters. HB 39 clause 1.3.18 describes a soaker flashing as a side or end flashing extended under roof coverings, which have the ribs closed, upstream of a penetration or at an abutment over flashed with a hanging flashing or pressure flashing against the upstand. Clause 5.5 states in Part G, upstand height for a soaker gutter and apron flashing to be 100 millimetres. This is to allow for a minimum hanging flashing overlap of not less than 50 mil and a minimum clearance of not less than 25 millimetres from the hanging flashing and soaker gutter and or apron flashing. On to sanitary plumbing. Expansion joints. This slide is depicting some examples of unsupported expansion joints and the incorrect configuration. The second photo shows that it doesn't have a clip and that the expansion gap has not been retained. The standard we look at for expansion joints and stacks is the AS/NZS 2032. Clause 6.4.23 states, expansion joints shall be located in stacks and vertical pipes at each floor at which fixtures or branch pipes are connected, shall be immediately above the highest branch connection and at the base of a stack or at the end of a drain connection for a discharge pipe when required under clause 6.4.2.2. Clause 6.4.4 states that expansion joints shall be supported at the socket section of the fitting by a fixed support. Care shall be taken to ensure that expansion fittings are correctly installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions and that the pipe is not bottomed in the expansion socket. 88-degree junctions. 88-degree junctions installed in graded pipework. This is quite a common fault found on a lot of elevated pipework. Seems to stem from an old school train of thought that 88-degree junctions are allowed above ground, but not below ground. We need to get across that the same regulation applies above and below ground. These types of fixtures, the fittings are picking up is also another common misconception. 3500s, Book 2, Clause 6.6.2.3 states, junctions, whether equal or unequal, shall be 45 degrees. Double 45-degree junctions or double sweep junctions shall not be used to make connections on grade. Exclusion zones. Exclusion zones, this is another common fault found in a lot of elevated pipe work. Again, the thought is that exclusion zones aren't required above ground and are only a requirement of below ground sanitary work. We need to stress the same applies above and below ground. 3500's Book 2, Clause 8.6.2.4 states, no connection shall be made within 600 millimetres of the bend. Note, for restricted connection zone below a graded offset, see figure 8.6.2.4, which is on that slide.
Thank you, Adam. Great presentation, and appreciate Glenn as well doing a great introduction. Go to questions and answers now, and I'll throw it over to Glenn. Well, actually, since Adam's there, I'll throw it over to Adam to respond to one of the questions.
The first question is, can we get a copy of the PIP checklists? So the PIP program is slightly different to the audit program, and they don't have a checklist specifically to look at. So they, the authorised officers are looking at the installed plumbing work at that time, and then they will issue notices to rectify the works based on what has been installed on site. So we do not have checklists for you to check. Glenn?
Can you request the VBA 10 site to review workmanship at a particular time during construction? Yes, you can. That is a referral from an external stakeholder, as we would call it. So we certainly attempt, where possible, depending on location, resource, time, everything like that, we would attempt to. We're more than happy to receive those referrals. What percentage of plumbing inspections are non-compliant? I think Adam covered this with 60%.
Yeah, we see there was at least 60% of inspections that received a letter of non-compliance. Yes, you will be able to review this session. It will be on our website.
I assume the overwhelming majority of proactive plumbing inspections are carried out on house sites. Are proactive inspections also carried out on fire service installations, such as sprinkler systems, fire hydrant, hose reel installations, etc.? The answer to that would be yes. As part of any inspection, we intend to inspect all plumbing installation. Fire sprinkler systems, that may end up in a crossover with building because they will be installed onto a building permit or a building plan. That may be crossover, but certainly all other fire systems that involve plumbing practitioners will be inspected by our plumbing authorised officers.
All right, this one's a long-going question. Are you allowed to use ply or yellow tongue as a substrate under box gutter or valley? Now, the answer is yes, if the metal is protected. So if you were to use it, you would need to either use some sarking to protect the metal from the chemicals in the yellow tongue, or quite often the plumbers use corrugated iron under their box gutters as well.
With all these common issues being found during inspections and audits, what is the VBA doing to educate the industry and not just the plumber in question? So sessions such as these are now being rolled out more frequently. So you will see us before on webinars, and we invite you to come along. What we used to call technical notes in the tech and regs section of the VBA website are being updated to practice notes. So there is also education pieces within the VBA website as well.
I'd like to also cover off that as well, Glenn. We are also engaging with external stakeholders a lot more as well, with the master builders, HIA and master plumbers as well. So we're looking at a holistic approach to provide as many findings of what we're seeing on site to get that early intervention and educational piece, so practitioners aren't making the same mistakes. So, you know, we're doing a lot more detail in our analysis of what we're finding on inspections and also audits. And we're making that information a lot more readily available to, like I said, all our external stakeholders.
There's a question here about the percentage of the VBA inspectors investigating and prosecuting unlicensed plumbing work. So, when an authorised officer attends an inspection, a proactive inspection, and there are plumbers on site, they will ask for a registration card or your licence card. And if you can't produce it, then the next steps are taken. If you guys in the industry find unlicensed people doing plumbing work, and you want to protect the livelihood of yourselves and everybody else in the industry, well, then you guys need to make a complaint through the VBA website, and then we can follow it up from there, and the investigations team will take over. But we do our inspections based on building permits, and audits are based on compliance certificates lodged. So we tend not to find too much in our inspection activity, and we are relying on you guys in the industry to help us protect the industry.
I'll answer another one. There was a question regarding, we covered off in our presentation a lot of domestic dwellings, and one of the questions were asked about commercial and hydrants and hose reels and sprinklers, and a large proportion are domestic homes. It's one of the biggest growth areas, but we certainly have a target to also do 10% commercial work as well. We just haven't included the findings of commercial applications, and yes, we do have a focus on ESMs, which is essential safety measures with plumbing, and we do proactive inspections in that space as well. So I hope that helps.
Inspections appear to be undertaken too late. Can they be done earlier in the project prior to plastering backfilling? There's two parts to that question. The backfilling part is, if that's to relate to sewage drains, then obviously drainage inspections need to be booked. For our other proactive inspections, yes, our ultimate window to come and inspect plumbing installations is at that lock-up pre-plaster stage, where we have all the plumbing installation installed. Selection of sites for that, as you can appreciate, particularly at the moment with lack of materials, lack of trays, etc., it is becoming quite troublesome, and we're either getting into sites too early or too late in some instances. But yes, ultimately, we do like to get there before plaster is applied or cladding is applied.
One of the key components of the proactive inspections is to get there at an early intervention before plaster, and that to be able to ensure that we get compliancy without it being an expensive cost. Obviously, when we go there as a plumbing audit team, it's once the work is completed and a certificate of compliance is issued, and obviously cost of rectification can be quite significant if you need to remove plaster and etc. So this program of proactive is to get there early and get that early intervention and share the findings at an early stage, which is why we provide these letters to the building practitioner to follow up. So hopefully that gives you some more insights.
There's a question here from Cameron Carter. As a plumber, we are constantly having battles with builders trying to educate them on plumbing regulations, i.e. sump depths and needing bulkheads. What can be done about this? This sort of question comes up a lot. The builder needs to have a broad overview of how and what plumbing works. The designer needs to be able to design the home so it can be compliant. And when the plumber is at early quoting stage, he needs to make sure that what has been asked of him can be done in a compliant manner. If at that stage you are aware that a box cutter they're trying to make it turn a corner or to go around something, but it needs to be flagged early so it possibly can be, the design can be altered. Because at the end of the day, the plumber who signs the certificate is responsible for the work, and if it fails, it's the plumber's responsibility.
There's another question here of that 10% seems a small number, and 10% of building permits is the focus for the proactive program. But then we haven't spoken about plumbing audits. That's another program, and that also represents a percentage as well of certificate of compliances. So we actually have multiple approaches. So hopefully that answers the question. But secondly, to that, because we are a limited resource, we do have a risk matrix and we work on a risk approach. So therefore, we're looking at identifying, for example, with certificate of compliances, we run a percentage over the top of the risky type of activity of work, practitioner intelligence, and then that provides us the focus. And same with building permits as well. We will have a particular focus where we will make sure that the resources we've got available are focused on the higher risk outcomes.
Gas safety compliance work and range of measurements. This is something that the builders need to be very aware of. You need to know what appliances are being installed and the requirements of those appliances. Most often you'll get a range hood and cooktop package from the same manufacturer. So you need to know then what the measurement will be. The minimum measurement is 600 mil from the gas standards, but a lot of manufacturers require 650 mil, some higher. So this one is a builder. The builder needs to be aware, and the plumber also needs to be aware and not install it if the range hood is going to be a problem.
There's one, how do VBA inspect the pre-built modular construction? At this stage, we do not do pre-built in their locations, but we will do plumbing audits on pre-built modular construction. We will do range inspections on pre-built modular, and we can use the example of the Micron site as an example of that. We've done a number of range inspections at that site.
There's a question here, is the VBA considering scrapping the certification program? No, we will not be scrapping the self-certification program and returning to mandatory inspections.
With the abundance of domestic carports, patios and verandas being constructed by builders, are these non-registered installers and installations policed? So again, we select sites based on building permits, and we will inspect any site that has a building permit attached to it. So if a carport, patio or veranda has a building permit attached to it, then there is a chance that we will do a proactive inspection on it.
There's a question here asking if, oh, it's just moved. There's a question here asking if plumbing work can be inspected on request. I'm assuming that's the plumber asking, or if it's the builder asking. In the audit space, it's a no. We're not we're a finite resource, and we're not an advisory council. If you've got a specific complaint, then that can be issued through the complaints line, and it will be assessed by the complaints team. And if it's deemed so, an inspection will be carried out.
One of the questions have come through about qualifications of our inspectors, and we do a combination of the proactive. So we have licensed plumbers or their qualifications to do plumbing inspections, and we also too have building inspectors as well. So they will be looking at the building issues, and the plumbing obviously will be looking at the plumbing component, and this presentation's solely about the plumbing. So I'd like to try to wrap it up here and just say thank you all for your questions, and thank Glenn and Adam for providing the responses to those. Any unanswered questions, we'll go back and review these questions, and we'll do our best to reply to them. For those in the Latrobe Valley area, the VBA is part of the Victorian Government Build Aware program. It's partnership with WorkSafe, AnySafe Victoria, and the Environment Protection Authority. We'll be holding a free trade breakfast next Tuesday, the 31st of May at Gelson's, Traralgon, between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. If anyone is available, you're more than welcome to attend, and we'll answer any additional questions for you at that point. We will have building and plumbing proactive there, so we will be welcome any questions further from there as well. And you can speak to us as a regulator about your obligations to comply with the building, construction environment, plumbing, and any occupation health and safety laws. To learn more, visit the VBA website. A link will be added to this presentation once it is uploaded as well. We hope to see you there. Thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it. And please make sure that if you want any additional webinars, or you've got any additional things that you would like us to present in the future, please let us know through the chat, and we'll welcome that feedback. There, like I said, there is a survey at the end, so please make sure that you fill it in. We welcome all feedback to improve these sessions. So thank you very much for your time, everyone, and appreciate it. Cheers.
Thank you.